Welcome to the Spirit Rock Music YouTube channel. Today we want to look at Leonard Cohen's Ballad of the Absent Mare. This is the most spiritual rock and pop music song that I have come across so far. A lot of songs contain spiritual aspects, but this one is special to me because it does not only highlight one or a few aspects of spirituality, but rather it describes the full path, starting from becoming a seeker up to the ultimate fulfillment, which is a radical transformation and transfiguration. The song was released in 1979 on Leonard Cohen's album Recent Songs, and he based it on the 10 bulls or 10 ox-herding pictures from the Chinese tradition of Chan Buddhism. And these pictures originate from the 12th century or maybe even from the 11th century. There are different versions of these. So Leonard Cohen transformed this series of 10 bulls into a modern cowboy story in which the lost ox became a horse, a mare. Like many tales of loss and love, this can be understood on various levels. We can see it as a parable of a partner lost and found again. From a spiritual perspective, it often makes sense to see things that happen in the outside world, scenery, landscape, and also persons, as aspects within one being. So here we could say the narrator has lost contact to his inner treasure, the core of his soul. We are not told when this happened, maybe very long ago. The important aspect is that now he realizes his loss. So this means he becomes a seeker. And then a difficult search begins. It turns out the search commences in very difficult and challenging conditions. In the song, Cohen describes that rivers flood the roads and destroy them, and the bridges are broken as well, and the seeker is in panic. So everything is in turmoil. And seeing this turmoil as an inner state, we could say that the river is maybe a symbol for the blood. And streets and bridges destroyed could signify that the original connection between the head and the heart has been lost. So the seeker is disoriented, he's even desperate. Quote from the lyrics, "The night is all wrong." But then a slight idea emerges. It's like a dream. So memory comes back. Memory of a former, more glorious state of being slowly returns. There once was a time when the mare followed his commands. We could say that this type of memory is not limited to the lifetime of one human being. Rather, it can be the voice of the immortal spark deep in his heart that knows about a different realm. And at least he now finds traces. But he is unaware how close the mare actually is. He looks for her everywhere. The immortal spark is within man and therefore nearer than hands and feet. However, usually we do not recognize it because we have become blind for its presence. The inner treasure is invisible to the rational mind. But the seeker described here in the song is serious in his approach. A bird's voice opens his heart, and soon his state is much transformed compared to the initial turmoil. In the lyrics, Cohen says of a songbird, and then he says that there's a warm sun and soft winds, so now he's much more calm and he can listen to his own inner being, and he can finally perceive the mare. So where does the seeker find the mare or the bull? The mare is located exactly at the border between light and darkness. So in order to catch her, he needs to become, we could say, a cross-border commuter himself. Looking at Rosicrucian symbolism, this is the intersection of the cross, the place where the horizontal bar of mortal life is crossed by the vertical bar of a higher realm. And this intersection is the place where Rosicrucians place the rose of the heart, And it's also the place within man that is susceptible to these impulses. And this is the place where the mare is grazing. The mare is no earthly being. She moves about in higher realms. Quote from the lyrics, she steps on the moon and she paws at the sky. But we know that Cohen chose the term sky rather than the more religious heaven. So now the next task is to catch the mare, and this brings about a twofold sacrifice. So, what are the two aspects of the sacrifice? We will see that in a moment. First, it's interesting to note that the singer-songwriter Cat Stevens, also known as Yusuf Islam later on, was also inspired by the 10 bulls, and at one stage in his career he judged his own progress on the path in the album title Catch Bull at 4. Okay, back to Cohen's song. The task to catch the bull or the mare is not easy because her longing drags her away from this dense material world. So for the spirit soul it is a severe sacrifice to bind herself to the material world and to a mortal human being. Quote from the lyrics, time for the burden. She needs to carry the horseman and she needs to deal with his moods and his crudeness. Quote, time for the whip. But unfortunately there is no other way. The spirit soul cannot break free from the cycle of birth and death without the help of a human personality. She is bound to sorrow and transitoriness, even though in principle she is immortal. And now the second part of the twofold sacrifice is the side of the human personality. So the human, on the other hand, realizes his task. He needs to help the spirit soul. So the personality sacrifice is to let go of her own ambitions and entrust herself to a new purpose in life. So both of them cannot help it. They have to connect and join forces. And now a new connection comes about. They bind themselves to each other, and when a seeker reaches this state, it's an almost impossible state, because it means that the immortal binds itself to mortality. And I find this very lyrical how Cohen presented this. He said, there's no space, but there's left and right. There's no time, but there's day and night. So a human that has reached this state essentially lives two lives. He still needs to follow the laws of nature, so that means he remains tied to time and space. At the same time, however, a new being blossoms within him, a being that can rise above these narrow limits. In the native land of this higher being, terms like left and right and time are essentially meaningless. So the taming process symbolizes a conscious decision in favor of this strange connection. We may be reminded of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's story, The Little Prince, and there's a scene of the taming of the fox, and this is associated with accepting responsibility of this connection. So now that the connection between the human and the soul has been established, or between the rider and the bull, the next task is returning home. Now their state is changed again. The homecoming begins. Both have made a voluntary decision. So now there is no more running away, there's no more crudeness, there are no more different goals. They have become one. We can associate this symbolism with the tamed ego, and we can see the ego as a will that evolved in separation to the Creator's plan. So now at this stage in the process, the ego is prepared to fulfill a higher will again and not its own liking. And now the following sections are more and more difficult to express in words. The two beings merge and they are ever harder to distinguish. Leonard Cohen writes more lyrically and more vaguely here. Short quote, "Love's like the smoke beyond all repair." So we could sum up images 7 to 9 to hint at a complete transformation, or transfiguration as it is called in the Holy Bible, in the New Testament, For example, in Matthew 17, Mark 9 or Luke 9. Looking at the images, at number 7 we see the bull transcended, and at number 8 both bull and self transcended. Nature offers a beautiful image of this process in the development from the caterpillar to the butterfly, and we may take consolation from this image. I find it very comforting because it means that if we feel unworthy to embark on this glorious path, we need not despair. And who is not unworthy in the light of this higher realm? I think everyone is unworthy. But it is not the eating addicted caterpillar that is being deified. This fat being with its tiny hair will never be able to fly, even if it feels a longing to do so. And the nice thing is that she doesn't have to fly. She only prepares the path for an entirely different creature. Within the cocoon, as we can see here in image 8, all the old structures are dissolved. And then when the butterfly embarks from the cocoon, to him flying is only natural, and it's not impossible like it was for the caterpillar. So at this point, the image is called Reaching the Source. We can ask ourselves where all this story came about, where it happened. Leonard Cohen breaks the narration at this point, and his darling interferes and talks to him and says, Leonard, it was just an old silhouette. Let it go by. And then Cohen's song ends here. So we can assume that all this happened rather within the narrator than out there on the plain before him. However, the Chinese cycle does not end at this point of disappearance in nirvana. In the Chinese cycle there's one more image, the 10th image, return to society. So we could say the newly born sage returns to the world to help his fellow human beings in their quest. Well, and that brings us to the end of this interpretation. I hope you liked it. If you did, leave it a thumbs up and also consider subscribing. It really helps the channel. Thank you and all the best, and see you soon.